Hello guys, welcome to Spark of the Youth podcast. You're listening to Youth by Daughter, one of my favorite songs. You also heard that in episode 1. So I wanted to thank everyone for listening to episode 1 and giving me some good feedback on that. You guys are awesome. And as always, if you haven't followed my social media, on Instagram it is Spark Youth Podcast. And on Facebook, it is Spark of the Youth Podcast. So go like those. If you haven't listened to episode 1, go listen to it. It's on Spotify. So this week's topic is going to be about the abortion law that's been going around. It's been up for debate. Everyone's going back and forth about it. So today we have Christina and Chris as my guests. I'm going to give them each a minute and 30 seconds to state their claims, and then we are going to move into somewhat of a debate between the two and move on with some questions, and we're just going to get into this topic and dig into it. So enjoy. So first, Chris is going to be stating his claim.
So my stance is I'm personally against abortions. However, I think there should be a law that allows them, but there should be restrictions in that law. Obviously, incest and rape, but some other ones also include like 1 abortion per female, depending on the circumstances. And also, if you're in a consensual romantic relationship, I think that the father's decision having a child should be considered.
So now we're going to have Christina state her claim, and a minute and 30 seconds now.
Okay, I am like 95% against all of these laws just because abortion, you should be able to have a choice as a woman, whatever the circumstances, but there should be some type of restriction. I'll agree with Chris on that. Some type of restriction on the normal abortion, but you should be able to have that right as a woman regardless of the situation. And the whole thing about miscarrying and going to jail for that is absolutely insane. You miscarrying is something completely natural. You can't will yourself to, hey, I'm going to have a miscarriage today. That's not a thing. So I'm like 100% against these.
Okay, so they didn't even need their minute and 30 seconds, which is pretty good. I'm going to give you guys 3 minutes, which I feel like you'll need more, but we're going to do 3 minutes of them debating with each other. And go.
So here's why I think that there should be restrictions. You mentioned 100% against the regardless situation. I know if in case of if rape or incest, I know you think there should be one, but it's statistically proven rape and incest make a very small percentage of the reason, and so does medical complication. I think all in total, it's around maybe almost less than 10%. A lot of the reasons why women get abortions are later for school, career, not mature enough, being a single mom, being unable to afford a child. Kind of like I said earlier, I think you should have the option of at least having 1 abortion based on your circumstances. Because I think the overall problem isn't so much where you can have abortion or not, but it's just the how sex is viewed in today's society. Sex is completely recreational in 2019. If you're just someone who's just having casual sex and you're constantly getting abortions, then that just proves you're not responsible. So I think the focus should be more on not so much wanting to have abortions. I think that should be a last straw, but you show the option. But so sex is viewed as just recreation. It's in 2019, you're not gonna stop people from having sex, but there's definitely a lack of sex education, and you should have that option. But in doing so, you have to understand the consequences of that and just how drastic that is.
Well, I agree with there's not enough sex education in our society because there's not. But I don't agree with the whole 1 abortion per person because it could be the same thing of circumstance. What if somebody, God forbid, gets raped 3 times in her life and she becomes pregnant? Why is she only liable for 1 abortion?
Well, that's what I mentioned. That's the circumstance. You get one abortion in the sense that it's your personal choice because let's say you're not ready. You can't afford it at the time. Mm-hmm. But if you're you mentioned, just say God forbid you're raped multiple times, then those should be automatically excused. However many times.
Well, how are you going to track that?
Then I think at that point it has to be they have to open a more of an investigation into it. Because it's very easily to just say oh, well, my boyfriend raped me, so I want to.
Okay, but what about all the unsolved cases of rape? Like, just because you do a rape kit doesn't mean that it's going to be viable. Rape kits are supposed to be 72 hours after. You're not supposed to shower. You're not supposed to do anything. And they can still come up negative. But that doesn't take away that the trauma that that person had. And the things that they do at the hospital, it's not for you. It's, at the end of the day, it's for the kid, if there is a possible child there. And that's not how it should be. It should be the mother, the person who is fully functioning and alive, the person that's supposed to be in the care. Like, I'm sorry, if something just happened at conception at that moment of rape, what is more important? That egg and that sperm, or the person who's functioning alive and giving you money through your insurance?
So I agree with you. I agree with you to the point where, like, there's a lot of unsolved rape cases, and I think that falls more like the justice system. Like, more definitely needs to be done about that. But the reason why I believe there should be like one and done is because there's a very small percentage of abortions are actually results of rape and medical complications. And in 2015, in 2015 as a whole, there was 913,000 abortions, and of those, a total of 44% were from people who got one or more abortions. So that's over 400,000 abortions that were from women who went more than once. And based on the statistics, it's safe to assume that those weren't instances of rape or those weren't instances of incest or anything like that. Those were just people who had unintended pregnancy again. And I think that falls back into the argument of then there has to be a more focus on just sex education. So they understand, like, hey, this is the consequences, here's what happened. You're allowed one because you should be mature enough and knowledgeable enough to understand that you have a child, that you have the ability to give birth, you have a child, that you have a child. It's your choice, it's your body, it's your choice. That's why you should have one. But you need to be more wisely about the people that you are sexually involved with.
But in the same breath, though, it's just like, for those people who are uneducated and everything, like, leave that aside. When you bring up statistics aren't 100% accurate, and that's the people who wish to even state that these are cases of rape or incest or anything. Because when you go into Planned Parenthood, you don't need to say why you're there. You're just saying, I'm getting an abortion. You don't have to make a claim. And a lot of people, just like they don't expose that they have been raped, is just because they are scared of having to go to the police or being scared to report something. So in those cases, your statistics might even be wrong. There might be a higher number of people just because they don't want to say that they were raped. That's an embarrassing thing for a lot of women to go in there and then feel the need that they have to report that. And that's not something that anybody should feel the need that they have to explain themselves why they're doing something. Granted, yes, there should be a restriction, I will agree, on abortion. Like, if you're just out here willy-nilly doing what you gotta do and you're not using the contraceptives that are provided by your insurance, and if you can't afford it through insurance, there's programs like Planned Parenthood that will give you these items for free. So yes, I will agree that there should be some type of restriction on abortion, but it shouldn't be a case of quote, quote, one and done just because things happen. And it's not even just rape and incest. There's other things that may happen, like fallopian tube pregnancies, or and not even a medical thing, just you can't afford it or whatever. But it's not a circumstance of, oh, well, I'm just going to continuously repeat my same mistake. But it's like, if you're taking the options and you're that 0.0001% where you are really fertile and birth control doesn't work for you, why are you exempt from that one and done rule? Like, that shouldn't be a thing.
But I think with every law, there's always going to be circumstances where, like, it's difficult for the law to work in your favor, like the 0.001%. At that point, like, are you really going to change the whole law around for that small percentage, or are you going to look at society as a whole? So it's kind of like if you have a room of 100 people and 99% of people agree with a certain rule, but you got that one person that doesn't, are you going to change the rule around because, oh, like, that one person doesn't, so we have to make sure, well,
I mean, this law was made because 1% of people agreed with this, and they just also happen to be in government. So what's the case now? Because all of the state is basically retaliating. All of the United States is retaliating. So what does that say about that 1% in the government who decided to make that law?
Then if that's the case, I feel like that falls more on the voters, on like who they're choosing. In a lot of cases,
well, that's not the case at all. Because what happened to people like who voted for Trump and then now they're realizing the stupid mistake that they did?
But that's the thing, like that, like.
it's about the people who are in office, and they should be reneged their power.
Yeah, but like you mentioned, like people who voted for Trump at the time, like they thought he was the best case, and that was their choice. So they voted for him, and now, granted, yeah, like they see like, oh, you know, I wish I could take it back, but you can't. If you want to get into the conversation, Trump never changed. Like Trump's the same Trump that he was when he first got elected. The only difference is like people are starting to realize that. So, like if you really look into it and you really look at your you pay attention and you do your research, you can find the politicians who work best for your beliefs, and you can put them in power. Now it's not always going to be the case. Like, per example, is Trump. You know, majority of countries, more people voted against him, but because of how things work, like that was the case. Like the cases that he got elected, you can still have your voice heard. Now it's not going to get fixed immediately. It's going to take time to really fix everything. But like the steps do need to get taken to prevent it. And like one of the steps being is like sex education. And the reason why I think that there should be at least some sort of restriction on abortions is because currently in the United States there's 400,000 kids that are in orphanages. They've been abandoned. Each year it's about 30,000 age out. So they turn 18, that's it, cut off. You're pretty much on your own. And every year 7,000 are added to it. So that number is growing each year, and the reason being is because the two main ones are like poverty and being a single parent, which I personally am against because there's just so many children who are in poverty-stricken homes and so many single parents, but they're able to make it work. So I don't really think that should be a valid reason to abandon your child. But one of the cases is lack of sex ed because they do not understand the ramifications of their actions that results in an unintended pregnancy. And because of that, because you're poor, because you cannot afford, or you're too young, wherever the case is, that results in child abandonment, which I feel is worse. It's worse than abortion. Because in abortion, you can always argue, well, it's not here yet. Like, whatever the case is that. But with child abandonment, like, you have a child, like, it's here. This is your responsibility, and you've chosen to abandon that child. And the other thing is abortion restrictions. So you're bringing these kids into the world, not only because you don't want them, but because, like, you're not in a position to give them the best life possible. So you give them up. And I think if you would have had like the ability to have an abortion at the time, there won't be as many children or abandoned each year. That number could dwindle down, and like we could hopefully see like abortions decrease over time.
Okay, so we're gonna stop right there for now. Obviously that was longer than 3 minutes, and that's okay because they made some good points. If you hear rain in the back, we're right next to the window, so just enjoy the rain sounds if you like that. And now we're going to go into a 30 or 40 second break for my cover of When the Party's Over. And we'll be right back. So I'm going to read a statement by Emily Boyer. She's one of my friends from school, and I want to get their opinions on it. So it says, contraceptives don't work 100% of the time. Example, first time I have sex, I do it with someone I've been with for a while. I use a condom, I make sure I use lube that doesn't break away the silicone or latex, I'm not drunk, I consent to the activity. I miss my period, no big deal. I don't get my period for 2 months. Again, no worries because my period is irregular, that I usually only get it 4 to 6 times per year. But on the safe side, I decide to do a pregnancy test just in case, since I'm paranoid and it could happen your first time. It's positive. Well, I'm panicking. I had no idea. Not everyone buys a pregnancy test after every time they have sex, do they? I wonder. What happens to my degree? I'm halfway done. I don't have a full-time job. And I calculated that if I had a full-time job with my pay, I could barely support myself. How do I care for this baby? I'm broke. Or at least I'll be broke so fast. Now I need to make a decision, life or death. I could put it up for adoption. There are too many children living in adoption centers. I could kill it. It won't feel pain, as I was lucky to catch it during the first trimester. I wouldn't go through with an abortion. If this was a real situation, I would keep it or put it up for adoption. But what if I couldn't? What if I needed to have that abortion for any reason? What if it was illegal for me to make that choice? I am pro-choice. My opinion will not change. I believe it is everyone's right to make that choice. I don't believe a collection of cells in your body without a brain who is practically a vegetable with the potential of life has more authority over a body than an alive woman. An abortion is basically pulling the plug on a brain-dead loved one. Yes, there should be limitations so people don't use it as birth control, but that would make this post worth more than 2 cents. So, what do you guys think about that? I really liked it because it kind of cleared up a lot for me in a way, because I was kind of like, but what if this or what if that? And I'm like, that kind of makes sense, but what do you guys think?
I agree with most of it. I wouldn't go to the extent of it's like pulling the plug on a brain dead loved one, because that person was here. There was a person who actually lived and is alive, and you have more sentimental value to that than quote quote a bundle of cells or whatever, however she put it. But the reality is abortion is a form of birth control. Is it something that you should be using all the time? No. That's what birth control pills are. That's what an IUD is for, the shot, the patch. There's so many different forms of it. So you should not be using abortion as a form of birth control, but in situations like that where it's going to affect your professional, collegiate career, I feel as though you should be able to do as you wished with your body. It's a woman's right, but in the same breath, that's a conversation, again, that I would agree with Chris with, that you have to have that conversation with your partner. It's not just because you're a woman, it's one-sided. It's your man's or whoever you decide to lay with, potential child as well, even if it's a bundle of cells at that moment. It's something that does have the potential of life, so it's a conversation that you guys need to have. But overall, I do agree with it, and it's not like I don't know. I just feel like there's so many ways that you can double protect yourself as a woman. Use a condom and use the birth control pills or any kind of other form before facing the reality of, hey, I might be pregnant, and going from there. But I don't know, just to resort to adoption for some things, it's just like, I don't know. This is a touchy subject for me, just because it's just like, would you rather abort it or put that child in the system where it takes $400 to abort a child comparatively to $15,000 to $40,000 to adopt a child in the United States? That's an actual fact. It takes $15,000 to $40,000 to adopt a child in the United States system, comparatively to $400, which is to abort. Not that I'm saying you should just be out here willy-nilly aborting your children, but in those circumstances, it's just like, wow. And who even knows that your child that you're giving up is actually going to be adopted? They could be lost in the system like all these other children that are stuck in poverty, and they're going to continue the cycle in the foster system, because so many things in the foster system are messed up. They're molesting their children. The foster families are molesting their children, raping their children, and then you're just starting a never-ending cycle. So it's just, what about those?
I think your friend brings up a really good point. And that's what I mentioned earlier, like, you know, like the one and done rule. Like, there are situations where like you are not ready, and like it's out of your control. Like you can afford it. You're in the middle of school. Like you're trying to establish yourself, and it's going to be difficult to do that with a child. And a study was done in Florida last year, where that's actually like 20% of the reason why there are abortions, for like social or economic reasons, whatever those reasons might be, just varying the situation. But also with that, I do think that like, and that's a perfect situation where like you'll say like use up, like you have your abortion, and then, but then after that, like that should be it. So in doing that, not understand like, all right, this is my last one. Like, you should make sure that you take the proper steps to, like, so avoid, like Christina said, like, plenty of contraceptions, but also make sure that you're choosing your partners wisely. Because let's say, you know, just like one night stand, you get an abortion, and like you have kids, so as a result, you get an abortion, and you have one night stand, and that's your second one. At that point, like, there's nothing that can be done for you because you had you had the first abortion, and that should have been your wake up call to make better choices about your sexual partners. But you didn't. So as a result, you have to care for the child. You have to take the child to term. Now, whether or not you put it up into the like foster care system, that's totally on you as a parent. But like, I just think it's like to just try and avoid overpacking an already broken system, like Christina said. I think more precautions have to be taken in who we are involving ourselves with.
So if it was like a case of your quote one and done, should like women and men be required like after that to take a class on sexual education because clearly can't get it right?
I do think so, because also like and this is what I mentioned earlier, like there should be like the father's input should be taken into account, and I just want to clarify on that. So let's say if it's just like, you know, a friends of benefit or like something like that, a one night stand, I think the decision should lean more towards the woman, because there's not really there's no attachment, you really don't know this person.
But you don't know that. You don't know that because there could be somebody, if you had a one night stand or whatever, and that person found out you were pregnant, like they could be attached to that child just as much. You can't say that just because they're a man that they're not going to be attached to something that's not even here yet. Because men and women, like, even though there are two different sentimental values between things, men can feel the same thing that a woman might feel. The woman might not want it, but the man's like, I'm all for it. Please keep it. I want my child.
So I wasn't referring to like the attachment to the child, but attachment towards like the woman. Because obviously, I feel like as a man, like you want to have a child with someone that you truly love, that you want to be with. Like that's something that like generally I feel like men do want. Now, if it's like a one night stand, you can't get attached to it and everything. But from personal experience, just like we all live in Canada, we're from the area. There's a lot of like one night stands that resolve pregnancies, and the father is not involved in life. I know more single mothers who are actually from relationships than I do families, like genuine families where the dad and the mom are together, they live together. Like being a single mom is a real thing. So like that does have to take into account. Yes, you could be attached, but what are the chances that you are going to live up to your expectations as a father? It's like based on just like personal experiences. Like we could all say like this is not now is going to be the case. Now if you're in like a consensual relationship, like everyone here to say where everyone's in a relationship. Let's say like your partner gets pregnant. I think a serious conversation has to happen between whether or not you want to happen. I just think that the father's choice should get taken into account. And a lot of people like the main comeback is always, oh, well, you know, it's my body, and I do agree with that. But also, like when you're thinking about like having a child and like taking someone else's child away from you or away from that person, I think that supersedes the it's my body. It's the my body.
It's
topic.
my body, but it's our decision.
Yes,
it's exactly what it is. It's just it takes two to tango, and if we're in a consensual relationship, we understand that these things happen, and it's not just the woman who decided to lay there; it's as well as the man.
Yes,
so.
But in those situation, let's say if the dad wants to keep it, the woman has all the power. Like, well, I don't want it, and like that, like if you're in a loving relationship, I feel like that will have more of a psychological and mental effect on you than if you're just had like a one night stand and your one night stand aborted the baby. Mm-hmm. Like because you're attached to that person, like you were looking forward to starting a family with this person, and that family got ripped from you, from someone that you supposedly love, that loves you.
But that's a conversation that needs to be had before said situation happens.
So
I mean, but then again, circumstances change, because what you said a year ago might not be the same thing in how you feel as of today. Like I could have told my significant other, yeah, I'm pro-life, I'm this, I'm that, and then today I found out I was pregnant. I'd be like, nope, I don't want it. But yes, that's a conversation we should have. I totally agree with you. That's a conversation that we need to have, just because what I said a year ago and that topic was never touched again. He'll still believe that, oh, she's gonna keep it. Yes, child, I'm happy. But the woman's just like, no, I don't want it. But in that circumstance, it's just like, yes, the woman is going to carry it, unfortunately, for 10 months. And yes, that's a conversation that happens, and yes, the man's opinion ranks above anything because it's just like, that's his child too. But at the end of the day, it's a woman. You're the one that's carrying it.
I feel like that goes along with like postpartum and everything.
Exactly.
Like if you don't want it, I mean, I think it goes with the conversation of having it with the father.
Was it Casey Anthony?
Casey Anthony.
Yeah, like
she murked her children because she didn't want them. But it's literally postpartum depression is a real thing. When you do not want your children, but you do that to appease your significant other, women literally go nuts. That's why, like, children wind up in refrigerators and in dumpsters and stuff, because they just don't want the child. Yeah. And then that puts the murder rate up for infant fatality.
Right. I think that's, like, that has to do with everything coming back to communication. Like, yeah. I think you should make the father understand, like, I really don't want this. This is going to make me depressed. This is going to this and that and that. And I think he should be understanding of that. And if he doesn't understand, then it needs to be talked about even more so that he understands that. And if he cares, he'll say, I understand. I don't want you to go through this or this and that. And if he really wants the kid, I feel like he'll say, well, why don't we try? You know, why don't we, like, I'll see what we can do. We can get some help. And it'll come to an agreement either way. But I feel like it all comes back to communication on that part.
It does.
Definitely.
And if it comes to the case where the woman's like no and the man's like yes, then that's something that you guys have to realize that might be the breaking point of your relationship. And if that's not a conversation that has already been had and you're just bringing this up now because I got a pregnancy test and it's positive, that's not the time and place for that conversation. These are conversations that you probably should be having continuously at some point, even if it's like in passing, like, hey babe, what if I got pregnant? Well, I would want the kid. And I don't want the kid. And then you, like what we're doing right now, why would you want the kid? Why would you not want the kid? What is the conversation in here? So I feel like you getting a positive sign on a pregnancy test shouldn't be where you have that conversation.
Hey, absolutely right. But so that also goes back to like just like the lack of sex education. So so, all right, so in 2015, 59% of abortions, they were from people who were between 20 and 29, right? And 7% were from 19 and younger. So if you think about it, between, like, let's say, like, you know, your like birthing age is like 14, just throwing out there. So like between 14 and 29, as a human being, like, what are those years? Those are years you're an adolescent, you're in puberty, you're establishing, you're trying to like figure out who you are. Then like when you hit like the 20s, early 20s, we all know it's like, you know, it could be a little rough because you're trying to establish yourself. Up until like even almost like early 30s, like you're still trying to figure out your way through life. And especially like in like early pregnancies, in a lot of cases when you get with someone, like that's not the first thing that comes to mind. The first thing isn't, do we have kids? Or in the event when we have a kid, like I want an abortion. Like that's not always a topic that comes up, because that's a situation that, while it does happen, I don't think people people like that's something that's the topic that people just automatically would have. Now, I agree with you that it's something that people should, but like in your relationship, accidents do happen because like you're so young and you're trying to like establish yourself, trying to find yourself. Like you're not thinking about having a kid, you're not thinking about that. Like a lot of times when we're young, when we're young and dumb, like we're thinking in the moment, we're thinking about the relationship in the moment. We're not always this conscious of the consequence of the relationship, like what can come out of it based on that. And I think that's why, like, that's where it gets a little cloudy, because the conversation isn't being had. I can't sit here and say, oh, well, like that's something you should have. I mean, obviously it's something you should have, but I can't like reprimand you if you don't have it, because like it's common. Like I think in two of my past relationships, I've never had like that conversation. Like we've talked about having kids, but we never had a conversation of like, oh, what if we had a kid right now? Like we weren't ready. I was in college. Like everyone was in college. Like there was no way we were ready to have a child. But that conversation of, what if it happened, never popped up.
I feel like it also depends on the magnitude of your relationship as well. Like, I was in an 8-year relationship, and that was a conversation that we had many of times. Just because, for me, I have a lot of medical issues. It's very possible for me to get pregnant regardless of birth control. I just think it depends on how invested you are with somebody. Because you can say, oh, yeah, I love you, and oh, I love you too, but that doesn't reflect on the inner feelings or the actions that the other person has. Like, for example, that relationship, yeah, we loved each other, but it was a I'm familiar with you type love. That's how it turned to the end, instead of I'm in love with you. And these were conversations that we had, just because it's just like, well, I don't want to start over with anybody else because you're familiar to me, but like, if we have a kid right now, I wouldn't be upset. And it turned to that kind of conversation. But like, if you're in a relationship with any person, even like a month in, that's a conversation as adults we should have. Going back to your point about sex education, you as a teacher should know, like, I mean, you teach second grade, so never mind. You teach second grade, but it doesn't matter. It's just like, this generation of children are exposed to sexual things a lot younger than we were. Mm-hmm. So when I was in Catholic school, I wasn't even taught sex education until the 8th grade. And that's a problem within itself, especially in Catholic school. When Catholic school, I can say from personal experience, I've seen a lot more girls who went to Catholic school become pregnant compared to public school. Because Catholic schools are just so against sex. And they're just they don't bring it up. They don't want to talk about it. And that's mainly the problem. Like, I shouldn't have to have waited to go to Camden Catholic to realize this is what sex is and whatever. Like, yeah, my mom had the talk of the birds and the bees, whatever, when I was like in 5th grade, but that's not the first thing that comes to mind. I want to go outside and play cowboys and Indians. Like, that's not the first thing that comes to mind. So it shouldn't have to take until high school. And now I think most public schools, they teach you sex education in 5th grade because that's like your spur of puberty, like you're like 10, 11, so it's like you're kind of getting familiar with it. But I feel like between 5th and 8th grade, your middle school years, you need to be educated. There should be sex health education during, like, I don't know how everybody else's school did, but like we did gym one semester and then we did sex education the other. And that's how it should be for like 5th to 8th grade, just so people, and it's not a case of, oh, well, I'm exposing you to this. It's no, I'm educating you on this because you're going to see sex throughout games, TV, movies. You're going to be more exposed to that. You might even be more exposed to walking in on somebody comparatively to being educated. So I feel like if you're more educated and you see these kinds of things, you're like, I maybe shouldn't be doing this, but at least I know if I were ever in the situation, I know how to put a condom on. I know to ask the girl if she's on birth control. And I feel like that, again, there might be cases and scenarios where you do have that one night stand and things just go left. But it's just, as in a conscious mind, that's how you should be going into sex. It's like, are we protected? Because you don't know if I have something. I don't know if you have something. These educational things need to happen more often just so everybody's protected, abortion rates go down. Hell, even orphanage, like things like foster care system goes down.
I feel like it also goes back to the parents. Like most parents think like, oh, my kid is good. They're not going to do this forever, blah, blah. They're not going to take that. They're not going to blah, blah. So I don't want to talk to
generation.
Yeah. Right. Like most parents think I have an angel and they're just going to... They're going to wait till marriage and blah, 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 but it doesn't happen. I feel like when you see your kid is in that stage where you feel like they're curious, you feel like they're staying in their room, or your daughter gets her period, like, for the first time, that needs to happen, and like anything.
Especially for the kids that go through puberty at, like,
11.
6. They're literally. No, but that's the thing. Like, my cousin, she developed boobs at, like, 7. She was very well developed at 10. She's the same.
And then they don't know why older men are looking at them.
Exactly. They don't know why they're getting bullied. They don't know why older men are, like, literally, if you ask a woman, when's the first time she has ever felt uncomfortable, I will guarantee you over 90% will always tell you something about when they were a little girl that they felt uncomfortable around some man because of why they developed young. And it's happening more and more with this generation where they are getting their periods and getting boobs and getting thick and like everything at age 8. And it's terrible just because it's just like, your sex now, and then it's becoming more and more of a thing of where pedophilia is becoming way more prevalent because these young girls are getting so developed. I mean, that's a whole other reason why they're getting so developed because, you know, hormones and stuff in our food, but it's just like, that's a whole other topic. But at the end of the day, it's just, if you're not educating them about these things, and even our sexual education system needs to change to the demographic that we are in right now. What we look like when we were 13, these kids do not look like. These kids look fully grown, like they're 20.
Look like what I look like now, and I'm like, you're 12?
And it's just in these cases of, like, rappers getting, like, stuck in these situations where they're having sex with 15-year-olds. Granted, they shouldn't have been in the club, but it's just like, if you look like you're 25 and you're in a club and somebody's like, yo, let's go chitty chitty bang bang, you're not gonna think about, like, oh, let me check her ID. It's no, she looks like how old I am, and then it comes out, find out later, like, She was 15. Like, why does a 15-year-old look like that?
So I went back to what you said earlier. So I feel like sex ed shouldn't stop at 8. I think sex ed should be like, you should get every year from like 5th to 12th. Just because I know when
even in college.
Exactly, but like in your high school years, like, I feel in your high school years that's when you're first introduced to sex. And I feel like in college is when you're like it's more frequent for you, just because of like the environment,
the freedom.
Yeah, the freedom, the environment. Like it wasn't until high school where the opportunity to have sex was more prevalent. And it wasn't until college where it's more frequent, which I think is where sex education should have a much harder focus. I mean, it should definitely be introduced early because, like you mentioned, like the kids today are getting like more exposed to things. I think that's just a result of like the parents not understanding like the new generation that's at hand. Like when you grew up in your generation, generations. Like when our kids grow up, like we're not gonna know the things that they have access to. So like parents don't know. The parents don't understand like their phones that they have internet on those phones. Like the music they listen to, the videos that they see, like it's all exposing things to them. That's just like not understanding the generation that they live in and the things that's surrounding them. Mm-hmm. So sex education should definitely happen. In the event where there is like you have to have abortion, that should be like your absolute last case. Like, I do think you should have it. That should be like a last case scenario. You should have like access to sex education. You should have access to contraceptives. If you make the decision, or you know what, like I just don't want kids. I never want to have kids. Blah blah. Like you should have that. You should have the option to like have a tube side or like have a contraceptive where like it's taken away from you, because all the
hysterectomy.
Huh?
A hysterectomy.
Yeah, yeah. But like that, like abortion should be like your like the last go to, and then that should be like, all right, you got it, and that's it. So you have to start making better choices.
Okay, so another question. Now, if this law is passed and it happens, do you think there should be an age limit? Maybe an 11-year-old gets raped and she ends up pregnant. So do you think anybody under, let's just say 18, anybody under 18 should be allowed an abortion, or should it just be everybody? Because of people over 18, like they should be more aware of these things and they should be educated or things like that. Do you guys think there should be an age limit, or how should we go about this if it was passed?
I don't think there should be an age limit, but if there was, I feel terrible saying this, like it has to be like 21, because just like, all right, well, if we can legally drink at this age, then all right, you should at that point be more conscious of yourself compared to an 18-year-old, because you know you've experienced life, you might have went to college, experienced some things that you may or may not should have experienced. But I feel like anybody under 21 should be guaranteed that, just because of things of rape, especially kids under 18. I don't know, I just feel like there shouldn't be an age limit, but if it had to be, like at least 21.
I would want to say 18, just because that's the legal age. You are an adult, so like you're an adult, you should be allowed to make those decisions, and unless in the case of like something extreme like rape. I feel it's kind of a loaded question, because I'm personally against it, but the line is a little blurred. There shouldn't be a law at all, but in the case where there is like you have to be an age limit, like I think it personally should be 18. But in doing so, like even before that, students should have access to all contraceptives, just to prevent that. More focus should be on like preventing unintended pregnancies than focusing so much on like, oh well, you know, time for abortion.
I feel like also too with that, people need to get rid of the stigma that just because a woman's on birth control doesn't mean that she's trying to have sex. It's because she's, number one, trying to protect herself, if the case may be, and then also women get irregular periods. Like if we just want to track it just for our own sanity, not all women are going on birth control just because they're just trying to have sex. There's other reasons why. So I feel like people need to get rid of that stigma automatically, especially in religious settings. And not get named like Scarlet A or something if like they do have sex and they become pregnant. Like it shouldn't be a thing of you're outcasted because you're pregnant. It's how can we help the situation? How did we get to this point? Because then you can have those conversations after the sexual education was implemented, contraceptives was implemented, these conversations were implemented, and it still happens. Now it's how did we get here, as opposed to the conversation now it's why are we here.
We're gonna wrap it up. So I'm going to give them each a minute and 15 just to kind of wrap up everything that's been said and leave us with some knowledge and what can change your opinion maybe or anything like that.
So, I want to point out at the beginning, Christina said that she was 100% against it, whereas I was against it with some restrictions. It seems like she's over to my side, so I think that means I won the debate. So, abortion should be allowed, but there should be restrictions on it. One of those restrictions being that unless in the instances of like rape or incest, there should be one abortion allowed per woman, and that should be after very extensive sexual education laws and the access to contraceptives.
So I'm still against these laws, yes, with a slight restriction on certain women. Again, I don't believe in the one and done thing that Chris kept saying. It's a woman's choice. Again, if it's in the circumstance where you're in a consensual relationship, that conversation needs to be had. But overall, I am still very against these laws, especially when it comes down to the miscarriage portion of these laws, because again, that's just absolutely insane. It's not a woman's possible choice to miscarry a child. But overall, I think it comes down to we need to get these people out of our government, just because they're not speaking for our generation. They're speaking upon their generation. They're like 80, 90 years old, and they don't really get the grasp of what our generation is actually going through, what our generation isn't exposed to. So I just think that we need to select better candidates to represent the world that we actually live in today.
All right. Well, I guess that concludes episode 2. I want to thank my guests, Chris and Christina. Thank you guys for coming in today and taking the time out to do this debate with me. And for you listeners out there, I hope you got something out of this. Personally, I am just not going to state my opinion on this because I just have so many things that can go into the topic and it could just go on forever. But I hope you guys took something out of this that maybe you needed to learn or maybe you already knew and it was just interesting for you to listen to. So please leave some feedback on this episode. Tell me your opinion on this topic or anything like that underneath the following post. And if you haven't followed my social medias, please do that. So on Instagram, it's Spark Youth Podcast. And on Facebook, the page is called Spark of the Youth Podcast. So give those a like and leave some comments. Do whatever you need to do. I hope you enjoyed this podcast and let me know what you want to hear in future podcasts. And as always, thank you guys for listening. I will speak to you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.